I paid for my older sister's wedding venue as a gift. Now my younger sister demands the same, and my parents are turning the family against me for saying no. I'm 32, male, and if there's one thing I've learned growing up, it's that family can be your greatest strength or your biggest headache. In my case, it's the latter more often than not. Let me explain. I'm the middle child stuck between two sisters. S, the older, who's always been the golden child, and L, the younger, who's spent her whole life being coddled and spoiled. S and I have always been close. L? Not so much. She's the kind of person who expects things handed to her without ever doing anything to earn them. And the worst part? My parents feed right into it. A couple of years ago, S got married. It was a beautiful day, and seeing her so happy made me feel good about something I did. A gift. I paid for her wedding venue. It wasn't something she asked for, but she was stressed out about finances, and I knew it would mean a lot to her. The venue wasn't cheap. Hell, it was probably the most expensive thing I've ever bought for someone. But it was worth it. S was grateful. She teared up when I told her, and she never made me feel like it was expected. It was just something I wanted to do for her. Then L found out. Now, at the time, L wasn't even dating anyone seriously, so the idea of her getting married wasn't even on the horizon. But the second she heard I'd paid for S's venue, she made a joke. At least, I thought it was a joke. So, when it's my turn, you're gonna cover my venue too, right? She said it with this laugh, but her eyes? Dead serious. I brushed it off, thinking we'd deal with it when the time came. Big mistake. Fast forward about a year, and Elle's engaged. Suddenly, the joke is a demand. The night she announces her engagement, she pulls me aside and hits me with it straight up. So, you're covering my wedding venue, right? I was stunned. She didn't ask. She didn't suggest it. She just expected it. Like it was a given. Like I owed it to her because I did it for S. I told her I'd think about it. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about it at all. I was stalling, trying to figure out how to let her down easy. See, my financial situation wasn't what it was when S got married. I'd bought a house, had some major expenses come up, and frankly, I wasn't in a position to drop tens of thousands of dollars again. But more than that, I didn't want to. With S, it had been a heartfelt gift. With L, it felt like an obligation, a demand, and that didn't sit right with me. The next day, my phone starts blowing up. It's my mom, calling me out of the blue. Why are you making L feel like she's not as important as S? She snaps. You paid for S's wedding. It's only fair you do the same for L, fair? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I explained to her that it wasn't about fairness. I paid for S's venue because I wanted to, not because I had to. I told her about my financial situation, about how I wasn't able to take on that kind of expense again. But she didn't care. You're being selfish, she says. And the way she said it, like it was a fact, pissed me off. You don't understand how much this means to her. Selfish. The word hung in the air like a bad smell, and it pissed me off more than I can explain. I had always tried to be the good son, the peacekeeper. I'm not the type to make waves, and this was no different. But something about this whole thing, this sense of entitlement from L, this pressure from my mom, made my blood boil. I told my mom I wasn't paying for L's wedding. That's when everything exploded. L started sending me passive-aggressive texts. Things like, I guess I know where I stand in the family now, and must be nice to be the favorite. I tried explaining again that this wasn't about favorites, that I didn't have the money to do this, but she wouldn't listen. She made it clear that, in her mind, I was choosing not to help because I didn't care about her as much as I cared about S. Then my dad got involved. He called me one night, and he wasn't his usual laid-back self. You need to think about how this looks, son, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You did this for S. Why can't you do it for L? We're a family. We should support each other. At this point, I was fuming. It was like no one was listening to me. No one cared that this wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I chose to help S because she appreciated it, and because it felt right. With L, it felt wrong. It felt like I was being strong-armed into doing something I didn't want to do, and it was infuriating. I held firm, though. I told my dad, just like I told my mom, that I wasn't paying for the venue. It wasn't happening. That's when Elle's fiancé called me. Yeah, you read that right. Elle's fiancé. He called me out of nowhere to talk sense into me. He told me that it would mean so much to Elle if I paid for the venue, that I'd be helping to bring the family closer, that it would show how much I cared. He even had the nerve to suggest that it was my duty as the brother. I couldn't believe it. This guy barely knew me, and here he was, trying to guilt-trip me into paying for something that wasn't his business in the first place. I shut him down immediately. No, I said, my voice steady, though inside I was burning with anger. I'm not paying for your wedding, and I'm not letting you or Elle manipulate me into doing it. He hung up, and that's when things really went south. Elle stopped talking to me completely. My parents were cold, distant, and clearly pissed off. Every time I went over to their house, there was this tension, this unspoken anger that lingered in the air. I felt like an outsider in my own family, like I was the villain for not bowing to their demands. A week later, my mom sends a group text. It was me, Elle, and my parents. The message was short, but it hit me like a truck. We've decided, as a family, that you need to contribute to Elle's wedding. It's only fair. You wouldn't want her to feel less important, would you? That was it. I snapped. I couldn't believe that my own family was ganging up on me like this, making decisions about my money, my life, without even talking to me first. I took a deep breath and replied, trying to keep calm, but knowing I was about to unleash everything I'd been holding back for weeks. I'm not paying for Elle's wedding. I didn't pay for S's because it was fair. I did it because I wanted to. I don't owe anyone anything, and the fact that you all think you can pressure me into this is ridiculous. I've worked hard for my money, and I get to decide how I spend it. If Elle's feelings are hurt, that's on her, not me. I hit send, and the silence that followed was deafening. No one replied. Not my parents, not S, not Elle. I didn't hear from any of them for days. The silence dragged on, and part of me felt a little guilty. Maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe I should have found a better way to explain myself. But at the same time, I knew I was right. I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into something I didn't want to do. Then S called. I had no idea they were pressuring you like that, she said, her voice soft. I'm so sorry. I never expected you to do anything for Elle. What you did for me was a gift, and I've always appreciated it, but I didn't want it to turn into this. Hearing her say that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't S's fault. She never asked for this. It was Elle and my parents, twisting everything into something ugly. The weeks after that were weird. I distanced myself from my family. I didn't go to the usual family dinners. I didn't reach out. I just needed space. Elle's wedding was creeping closer, and I knew I'd have to face them eventually, but I wasn't ready yet. Then the day came. I went to the wedding, because despite everything, Elle is still my sister. But it was awkward as hell. We barely spoke. She was polite, but distant. My parents kept giving me these disappointed looks, like I'd failed them somehow. The whole thing felt off, and honestly, I couldn't wait to leave. As I sat there, watching Elle dance with her new husband, I couldn't help but feel like I'd done the right thing, even if no one else agreed. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me, and if that meant being the bad guy, then so be it. After the wedding, I didn't stick around for the reception longer than I had to. I paid my respects, gave a half-hearted hug to Elle, and made my exit as soon as it was socially acceptable. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I wasn't about to spend the rest of the night pretending everything was fine, when it clearly wasn't. As I drove home, I couldn't stop replaying the last few months in my head. How had things spiraled so out of control? How had I become the villain in this family narrative just because I chose to say no? For the next couple of weeks, I kept my distance. There were no texts from Elle, no calls from my parents. My family had gone radio silent, and honestly, part of me was relieved. I didn't have the energy to keep fighting about something so ridiculous. I figured, with time, they'd come around. They'd see that this wasn't about money or favoritism. This was about boundaries, about me not letting them dictate what I did with my life or my finances. But then, about a month later, I got a call from my mom. She didn't bother with small talk. "We need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "About what?" I already knew where this was going, but I let her continue. "About the family. About Elle. You can't just keep ignoring this. We're all upset with how things have turned out, and it's time you made amends." I felt my stomach tighten with frustration. Amends? Like I had done something wrong? I'd been more than patient through all of this, and now they wanted me to apologize? "Mom," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm, "I don't owe anyone an apology. I didn't do anything wrong. I set a boundary, and just because you and Elle don't like it doesn't mean I'm the one who needs to fix things." "You've always been so stubborn," she snapped, her patience clearly worn thin. "This isn't about boundaries. It's about fairness. You set a precedent when you paid for S's wedding, and now Elle feels like she's less important. Can you understand that?" "I understand that Elle feels entitled to something she was never promised." I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "And I understand that you're backing her up instead of supporting me when I'm the one who's been put in an impossible situation. Do you realize how unfair it is for you to expect me to foot the bill for another wedding just because I helped us out? That's not how this works, Mom." She was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I was getting through to her. But then she spoke again, and her words hit like a punch to the gut. "You're tearing this family apart. You know that? All over some money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about the money. It never had been. But no matter how many times I tried to explain it, they just couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. "I'm not the one tearing this family apart," I said, my voice low and tight. "You are. You and Elle. You're the ones making this about something it isn't. I didn't ask for any of this, and I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself." Before she could respond, I hung up the phone. That was the last real conversation I had with my mom for months. After that, I went full no contact with my family. I needed space to breathe, to think, to live my life without the constant guilt trips and manipulation. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed the way things used to be, when family dinners didn't feel like battlegrounds, and when I didn't have to constantly defend myself for simply making a choice. S stayed neutral in all of this, and I appreciated that. We still hung out, and she never pushed me to reconcile with Elle or my parents. She understood that this wasn't about the wedding or the money. It was about something much deeper. And for that, I was grateful. But Elle? She never reached out. Not once. Not even to talk things through, or find some common ground. It was like in her mind, I no longer existed. And my parents? They made it clear that until I fixed things, I wasn't welcome at family events. Birthdays, holidays, everything passed without a word from them. At first, I was angry. Angry that they had chosen sides. Angry that they were willing to lose me over something so trivial. But over time, that anger faded, replaced by a kind of sad acceptance. This was who they were. This was who Elle was. I couldn't change that, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being just to keep the peace. Eventually, the distance became normal. Life went on, and I threw myself into work, hobbies, and my own friendships. I found peace in knowing that I had done what was right for me, even if it meant losing something along the way. Then, one day out of the blue, my mom called again. It had been nearly a year since the wedding, and I hadn't heard a word from any of them since that last argument. "We need to talk," she said, her voice softer than it had been before. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her no, to hang up and continue with my life without reopening old wounds. But there was something in her tone, something different, that made me pause. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "It's about Elle," she said quietly. "Her marriage? It's falling apart. She's been through a lot, and she needs her family. She needs you." I didn't know how to respond. After everything, after all the fighting and the coldness and the manipulation, now they were coming to me because Elle's life wasn't going according to plan? The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, not sure where this conversation was going. We were wrong, my mom continued, her voice shaky. About everything, about how we treated you. Els realized that she pushed you away, and we, your father and I, we just want to fix things. Can we start over? For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I thought about everything that had happened, about how they had treated me like an ATM, how they had made me feel like an outsider in my own family. But I also thought about what it would mean to hold on to that anger, to keep the door closed forever. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to think about it. And that's where things are now. I haven't fully forgiven them, and I'm not sure if I ever will. But I'm open to the idea of rebuilding, slowly, on my terms. They don't get to demand anything from me anymore, and they certainly don't get to tell me how to handle my life or my money. But maybe, just maybe, there's a chance for some kind of healing. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.